Would you like me to start?
You can start.
Okay. So hi everyone, my name is Sasha. I'm actually from Australia, so it's 9 p.m. at night here. You may see my family in the background. We're doing schoolwork. So I just actually wanted to do a bit of an introduction regarding the university before I put my presentation together. So the International Internship University, the IIU, is the world's first internship-based virtual university, building a better and brighter future for all young leaders, and is committed to P Group, providing quality, accessible, affordable and skill-based location independent education to learners across the world. It is a conventional education system by cutting down the additional costs, providing access to more than 1,000 courses and internships to e-learners across the globe, with a team of highly calibre and experienced global educators. IIU has been accredited and affiliated with the World Educational Organization, WEO, an international accreditation organization, IAO, and collaborated with the world's top universities and educational institutions through the platform of massive open online courses, MOOC. IIU provides various certificates, diploma courses, including graduation, post-diploma, graduation, post-graduation courses, and honorary doctorates. The IIU has received many accreditations and per international standards for its innovation, vision, creative ideas, researches, and white paper publications. There is always that one person who has the vision, the thought and the idea behind the successful ventures and organisations. And if we talk about the man behind the success of IIU is none other than the co-founder, Mr. Paresh Pandit, a committed, inspiring social activist, passionate educationalist from the last 2 decades, providing education to students from various social and cultural backgrounds, providing excellent administration, verbal communication, and written skills. He's the next generation speaker and passionate writer, versatile, and is the founder of Swanda Bharat and the chairman of Paresh Group. He has concocted the world's first virtual international internship university during a pandemic, and the International Internship University for the IIU, and it brings change, it brings more of a change, and it brings revolution. So, hi everyone, my name is Ms.Sacha Kaluri. I am an international motivational speaker from Australia. I predominantly work with young people across Australia, America and New Zealand, and also get to speak right across the globe to different organisations that are working with young people. Today I wanted to present to you because I've been working with young people for more than 23 years, I've been able to connect with them on various ways through the work that I do. And today I wanted to present to you some of the ways that I've connected with young people and my students, and to give you a bit more of an idea on how you can actually connect with them while you're actually teaching them in your classes. So I'm now just about to share my screen. Can you actually give me allow to be able to share my screen, please?
It's okay.
So just to give you a bit of a background with me, over the past 23 years, I probably present to more than 150 groups of students right across the world. I also have a book called The 2 Worlds of Your Teenager, which is helping your teenager find and navigate themselves through their careers. Also a TV and radio host, and have also sat on the board of various charities as well. So I just want to look at what actually makes a great teacher. And one of the things that's really important when we're thinking about what makes a great teacher is that it's really important for us to reflect and think to ourselves, what is it that that makes an impact? And often a lot of us will actually have situations in our lives where we'll reflect back in our school life and see that that one teacher that believed in us pushed us further. And the reason they push us further is they stretch us with our ability. So as a student, they may know that they have a capacity to go so far, but the teacher's ability is to stretch that and to allow them to see them how they can go further. And how they can actually do that is just by recognizing them and giving them that encouragement to be able to go back and to let them know that they can do these things and things are actually possible, no matter what is actually going on in their lives. So when we are thinking of teachers, we also need to remember that teachers are not parents. So it's a very different relationship, because often parents will have young people won't necessarily follow what their parents are asking them to do. They'll have so much more arguing, whereas teachers will actually be able to do that because this is their job, for able to get students to think for themselves. Many teachers there'll be, if we look at great teachers in our lifetime, there's almost like a span. And if we look at the spectrum, we can have teachers that are very, very strict and teachers that are very, very free, loving, and allow students to, really think for themselves or do different. Now, this is not a seminar that's really about actually saying which one is better or which one is worse. It's actually about finding your own place in that spectrum, because where we really do need to understand is everywhere on that spectrum of saying a strict teacher versus a teacher that allows more freedom within a classroom. Really, we have to look at different students' abilities across the scale. So at some times you will actually get students that work very, very well in an environment where the teacher is very strict, doesn't allow for much speaking, tells them exactly what they needed to do and makes them work that way, and is very, very strict within a classroom. That doesn't mean that a teacher that is very, very free in a classroom doesn't also get the best out of those people. I guess that the most important part here is about actually going, I'm very big on saying being the best version of yourself as that teacher. And it has to be what works with you. And as you're a new teacher starting out within a classroom, it's really about playing around with those ways of finding your own feet and seeing where that works. And at some point you can actually fluctuate and allow students to see that at some point you can allow a classroom where students can walk around the classroom, feel free to speak their opinion and, have a laugh and have fun. And then other times actually expect them to work. It's really about what it is in your, I really encourage teachers to experiment with that, especially when they get out there for the very first time and start to teach classes, to experiment and see what actually works with them. And it may take a few years to be able to find your feet, but not actually think that this is the way that it goes because you've seen another teacher and to model off them. It's great to model off another teacher that you've seen, but also you need to take into account what your type of personality is. So my personality in the classroom allows for that free movement where young people especially get that ability to be able to walk around and connect with each other, especially working in group environments. But there is also times when I do demand young people's attention, and that's about, I've found my feet around how I do it. And often when I'm actually doing that, I'm not so much a person that stands up in front of people and tells them what to do in how they do that. I'll often, if I'm trying to demand attention from a classroom, I'll often stand at the front of a classroom, bow my head down, look down at the floor, and won't actually say anything. And you'll find that it's a strategy that I use, and I use this on a daily basis when I feel like the group is actually not listening to me. And just to give you an idea, my normal classrooms are around about, between 100 and 200 students. So commanding their attention can often get quite difficult to be able to do that. And literally one of the ways that I do that is I just stand and I put my head down. And what actually then happens is a lot of the time, the young people that are really interested in learning from that class will actually then tell the other students to be quiet. And that's far more effective when a peer actually says, I'm really here to listen, than me to do that. Because what can actually happen is that I'm constantly telling people to listen. And then what happens is the young people that are really there listening get quite bored of hearing the other students being told off all the time. So it actually switches off students that are there to listen. It's a strategy that I found, and it's really a great strategy that I recommend lots of people to use. And that's actually what the strategy on that is, really about getting your peers to support you, the peers to support each other, and letting other people in that classroom know about that they are there to learn and they're demanding their own attention. One of the things that I think that is really the most important, and it goes back down to the vibe of that students, is really about being real with yourself and also expressing your own moods, what's going on in your life, letting them know parts of you so that there is some sort of way of understanding who you are. And I love it when, for example, at the beginning of when my teachers, at the beginning of my own children's school, I find that at the when teachers actually introduce themselves to parents at the beginning of the year, especially if you've got children in high school or primary school, they'll often tell us a little bit about themselves so that you have some sort of understanding who they are. So then when they're referring back to their family, you'll know who they are, how they're married, how many children they have, what pets they have, what their likes and dislikes are, so that there becomes a to and fro of back of sharing. What will actually happen sometimes is often we as teachers, we expect students to share so much of themselves, yet they don't really know that much about themselves. So when they're all sitting around in a group and expected to share what they did on the weekend or what they had, it's really important for teachers to be able to make that input themselves and actually use that connection and actually be real. And what that does show is if you're having them over the course of a year, it's really about them actually having some sort of reflection and knowing that they get to see the ups and downs of your life. So, for example, it's not always just about sharing the good things about your life. It may actually be that, you know, on that day where you say, my children have been sick all week and I've been at home and things have been really tough. It's about sharing that. Then on the other hand, saying, I had a great weekend, all of these things. It really does need to be a reflection of going back and forth so that they are able to see that your life is not just perfect, same as how they may feel their life is not perfect as well. So it's another way of introducing people, because often, again, on social media, everybody tries to portray that their life is perfect. Again, when we're in the workplace, instead of trying to portray it's perfect, it's not about sharing every intimate moment with your life, but it also is about saying, these are the things that are going on. That means that students are more likely to share their part of themselves when things aren't going so right for them. And I also look at, when I think of this, I ask people to think about their actual own vibe of what it is of what they are doing and the way that they're actually teaching. And I ask people to look back and reflect of their time when they were at school, and imagine on a day where you're at school and it's on that day where your normal teacher is actually away, and you now have a substitute teacher or an emergency teacher, and that teacher just walks in and the whole class doesn't know that teacher, and the whole class, they walk in and that teacher only walks in, puts their books on the desk, and all of a sudden the whole classroom acts in a certain way. And if you think about it, it's almost like they're reading that vibe of that teacher. So in some instances, the whole class will walk in, they'll put their books down, they'll sit perfectly, and they'll be there ready to learn. Versus another time, it could be the same, it could be a completely other teacher. Students walk in, they may be acting disrespectful, they may be acting where they're quite rowdy, they're not paying attention. And that is really where, as teachers, we must actually say, what is it that I'm giving out? Because a lot of the time you'll start to see that class starts to act the same way. So they go from one classroom and they're very, very silent, they're working very, very well, and they go into the next classroom, and that same class that worked extremely well in that class can work very, very rowdy in the next class. So it's very, very important that we also look at what is our vibe that we're actually giving out. And that's a sense of where we can also connect with other teachers and think, what can I do? And that's again where we're experimenting with different things on how we're actually feeling. So I guess that one of the most important things I look at when we're in university and we're starting out to be a teacher is that we actually have to have a real passion for learning and a passion for teaching. It is very, very easy to see when somebody likes their job versus when somebody doesn't. It's often very easy when you can see somebody at the end of their teaching career, and you can see on those last few years of their teaching career that that doesn't mean that they're on a teaching career of they're older. It may be that they've been teaching for 5-10 years and it's not a career for them. But you can actually see when a teacher is motivated, they're excited, they have high energy, they have enthusiasm, and they're very big on building great relationships with their students. And I think one of the most important things is building those relationships and getting to know students on each individual level. And that may actually mean having those little conversations, making sure that you greet them when you see them, remembering their name, and then when you do, like if there's a student that has a particular interest in a sport, remember the next week, ask them, hey, how did you do in that particular thing? So they feel remembered. Everybody feels special when they are remembered, or their name's remembered, or something about them is remembered. They actually feel good. And so most likely they will want to impress them. So we actually want to impress our teachers because, as I said, we're not like our parents. And with our parents, we have a natural instinct without expressing if there's been any trauma. But on a normal circumstances, we understand that without knowing, we know that our parents will love us no matter what. Again, it's not always, but majority of the people, we know that our parents love us no matter what. Whereas with teachers, we are constantly seeking their approval. And it's almost like if you have a classroom of 20 people or 30 people, they're all wanting that same thing from that teacher. So making sure that we give them that love and approval and giving them back that in that sense back, then what they'll actually do is they'll want to impress you more, which is why they're able to control that group, which is why everyone seems to be getting down. Because if everybody that's getting the A's and B's or they're talking to the student gets the attention, you want that as well. But also remember, not everybody has those learning. Some people may need those extra learning strategies. So it's really important that we set goals that excite those students so that when they reach them and they're doable, but it stretches them, then they can actually achieve and they get excited to achieve better for you. So the other thing is to really create a space here where there is a low anxiety and fear of failure. We want to create an environment within the classroom that it's almost like when you're expressing and you're teaching them, say, this is what we will be learning about. And it's one of the great strategies is saying, by the end of this week, you will know. By the end of this week, you will have learnt that maths strategy. By the end of this week, you will have. So what that says to me is that I'm excited that you're giving me some sort of guarantee that by the end of this week, I know that I will have achieved this. So I'm already setting up my standard and I know that you'll be able to do this because I'm giving you this information because you are equipped to be able to take that information because I know that this is something your ability to do and I know that you'll like it. So it's really about putting in that positive language as well by saying you'll be really excited to learn this and understand this and you will get this. And I know that you'll all do really well with this. And then those students that you feel that will have that anxiety or may feel like they won't, that's when you give them that extra special attention to create that space where there is low anxiety and low fear of failure. There's absolutely no way that a student can sit in a classroom and learn when all they're thinking about is, I'm not good enough, it can't work, it's not going to happen, I'm so scared, what if they ask me a question? Our mind gets so completely taken over by all of these things that there's no space in actually their mind actually taking in that. And we would know this ourselves as adults when we would sit in an, in any time in a session where we're in a classroom as adults and we're going back and learning, and they say, does anyone have any questions? And even as adults, we tend to go, oh, okay, do I have any questions? And if you put your hand up to ask a question, you can actually get quite nervous. So imagine these students are actually feeling exactly the same thing. What will other people do? How can we do it? And how can we create a space where everybody's feeling really good about themselves? So it's all about tell them what they'll learn, teach them what they'll learn, and remind them of what they've actually learned. So the other thing is actually looking at reminding yourself that throughout your class that you need to be able to understand that you have various ways in which you actually teach. So if we think about how it is that we learn, and I ask everybody to just do an activity with me and just to close your eyes for a moment. And when you close your eyes, and if you close your eyes, I just want you to imagine the beach. So if you just close your eyes for a second and you imagine what the beach looks like. And if I give you that space to go off into your imagination and understand what that is, some of us, if I gave you a little bit more time, some of us will see the horizon, see the water, see what that, boats maybe in the edge, people walking through the beach. You'll see it in your mind's eye, in your imagination. Other people will hear the birds flying, hear the waves crashing, hear people and playing and whatever it might be. Other people may feel the warm sun on their body, may actually feel the sand in their toes or their feet in the water. If we think about, are we visual people? Are we seeing things? Are we people that are more audible? Did we kind of hear the sound? Or are we people that are more where we're thinking about how it actually made us feel when we're doing that? Now, some of us will have all of those, but some of us will have one of those things that'll be much more prevalent than the others. And that is the sense of how we learn. So, for example, in myself, when I imagine the beach, for me, it's really about the water, how it feels, the warm sun. I've got my feet in the water. I take off my shoes. I'm walking on that sand. I can really feel that sand. That's how I imagine it. I can imagine the wind flowing through my hair. That's how I imagine it. So when a teacher actually teaches me something and then puts a story or a twist around it, it's most likely going to teach me. So we need to be able to understand that we have elements in our session that's all about being visual. We need to make sure that we use all of our senses. How can we utilize our senses? How can we get them to imagine things? How can we get them to bring things in where they're touching things and looking at things? How can we use some sort of story where we're actually going back on that? How can we actually change our tone? I often find that when I'm telling something or doing something and I'm getting students, it needs to be fast, I speed up the tone in the way that I speak. And to get them to know we're in a hurry, we need to move this forward. Other times, if I'm saying something that's very important and I really want them to understand, I'll actually slow my speech down, maybe even lower my voice, because often they'll listen more and they'll understand. This is a space where I need to take in what this person is actually saying. We need to understand that speaking at that same level won't always do it right. We need to make sure that we get excited when it's something that we're excited talking about. It needs to be, if we're speaking at something that's very important, we can slow it down. So we have those levels of how it is that we do. Understanding that our body language and our body movement. So for example, you'll be seeing I use my hands, I move my body, even though it's just that you're able to see this, because I want you to be able to see the energy that I bring to this and the effort on how I do in my own self. So use your body, and often also get students to use their body. It may actually be a movement. If you find that your students are sitting around all day, make sure that you get them up, have a bit of a stretch, have a bit of a movement, or get them to do an activity where they must move around the classroom and sit around in groups, and there's some sort of movement in there. How else can we use music? Music is a universal language. So can we do it so that then they're walking in the room, there's a music that's going to, whatever it might be, we're setting that tone of that classroom. So it may be in a day when we're excited to learn something, have great excitement music. In a day when we're asking for things to be calm, we have a calmer music. So it may actually be on a different time. Remember to be able to use these things and change these things up, so that, because students may get tired, and it may not be because of you in that sense, or what you're actually doing. Students have much more in their life. And I give a perfect example today. I had a class of 70 students, and they were helping me carry things from my car into the classroom, but these two students. And I literally just said, how was your weekend? What did you do? And these two students had just finished night shift, working an 8-hour shift of night shift, went home, had a shower, and was back at school by 8:30. So no matter how entertaining I was, if these boys would have been, two males, would have been tired, lucky they were quite revved up and quite doing so well. But we need to change it up to have an understanding of what's going on in their lives as well, because any of your students may actually be going through lots of different things and lots of different issues as well. So we need to understand to keep the energy flows within the room. I always look at this, the first 5 minutes. Often we need to spend the first 5 minutes, and that's necessarily going along and getting to know the students. So as they're walking in, how can I have those little conversations with those students to connect with them in some sort of way? How was it while everybody else was getting ready? As those students walk in, make sure that you're connecting with them. It's not apparent. I understand sometimes we have got a lot of curriculum to get through in a certain amount of time, but making sure that we don't start on that content right away, that there is some sort of back and forth. Hey, how are we going? Talking about things, maybe even connecting individual with students, and that, going back and forth with that. It's a great thing to do, especially in your first class of the morning, and obviously spending much more time around that at the end of the year. So, and then that gives that back and forth flow of what students will do. And I look at that with a football club that I worked with within Australia, and they were a club that was right down the bottom of all the clubs. And one of the first things that they did was, at the beginning of every day, they would do a round circle, and everyone would have to share parts of their life. And it became like a team of everybody actually knowing each other so much more. So that meant that you knew my good days, you knew my bad days, you knew actually things about me, so that if I wasn't performing very well, you would know why, know what was going on. And it actually created a story within the group, and actually brought that group to being the lowest to then the highest. And that's one of the most important parts, is how do we get back so that these students actually connect with them as well. It's really about making sure that when we're looking, it's instilling confidence in them. So it remembers them that of how someone, we really need to understand of thinking about it and say, when we remember anyone, majority of the time is, how did somebody make us feel? So it's not necessarily about the content. If you look back on your own teachers of what it did, it made you feel great. I think of my old English teacher when I was at school, and they would read these parts of these stories that we would be reading at home in these books, and they would read them so beautifully, and the way that they would explain and dissect these characters was so good. It made me float off into a world to be able to understand things and see the world in a different place. So do I actually think of what that teacher's actually taught me? No, but that part of where it opened my mind to be able to see things that I'd never been able to do before. And that's what that teacher taught me, as well as dissecting and understanding. It actually taught me about seeing the world differently, and that made me feel good. So if we think about those things, what is it that we can actually do back? In what they go. So it's rather than actually saying, well, this person taught me fractions and this person taught me this, there's each individual day that somebody actually taught us something, and it flicked a switch within us. So we're encouraging students, we're having them go, and we're also having patience, because often as parents, we may not necessarily have that patience as well. So again, like I said, revealing something about ourselves. This is myself again, where I would reveal something about my job, my life, who are the people in my life, what is it that I do. And so that there's almost like a chapter. As you meet me, you get to know more and more and more about everything in my life that you will actually see. So I'll show you a photo of my family. There's my husband and my 2 children. You'll see what I do for a job. You'll see that I've worked within television industry. I get to reveal a little part of myself all the time. That means that when that student actually connects with me, then they are okay to reveal something of themselves. So it's very important that we also need to make sure that we have to have up-to-date knowledge in all of those subjects. But most of the time, understanding as teachers, we don't know everything. And so often we can become a mentor as well as a co-learner. You will find that there will be people within your classroom that will have skills in areas that you may not necessarily understand. So that is when you can actually ask them. And there's nothing greater than a student feel like they've actually taught you something in what you've been able to do. So if there's something, feel free to be able to say, how can we go back and forth and learn from each other in something that's new, maybe around technology or whatever it might be, and then letting them know that you've actually learned something as well. And that makes them feel like they've actually contributed something and made a change and an impact on you just as much as you have with them. So when you've known, and how we can often have those different things is teach the teacher, and group sharing, and actually where I've got a skill and I get to give back and teach that group. Often, one of the great strategies is that instead of that teacher having to share everything, is that everyone in the class actually gets to learn and present something. So it's a group teaching, peer group look on what it is that we're doing. I look at this and I think probably one of the most important qualities to have as a teacher is empathy. And I look of empathy and understanding that it's really about believing in your capacity of your students and understanding all of the issues that they actually may be going through. So thinking about what is it that really opening up your mind, and also thinking about when you are having that empathy is to when I say open up your mind, some of your students may actually have a situation where you in your own private life may not agree with, or it may not be a value you have. But rather than being judgmental, we all also need to understand this is what they're doing. We can't actually stop them in their own learning path and their own path in what they do. So, and that's where we get them really, really excited to learn and focus. I'm always, great on making sure that I greet students with a smile. It's a great warm welcome, and also making sure that we have a great communication so that they can actually go back and forth, and that there is some strong setting that if anyone within the group does actually not create a space where they're not learning, or that they are actually pulled aside and know that they can't actually speak to students in a way where they are stopping them from speaking up. So creating that trusting and safe environment is really important. Okay. As far as what we do is making sure that we're also great carriers. And I also look at and say, how can they teach me? What is it that they can do? What can your teachers teach you? How can you show them that you're warm, enthusiastic, then you're a great listener, then they will mirror off and see you as a great listener, and support their own personal issues regardless of your opinion. So it may go against your religious beliefs. It may go against any of your feelings, but we can't judge them because they are on their own path of what they are doing. So really having empathy and caring is really important. Creating a positive growth mindset is really, really important too, because one of the first things that I do with young people is often have games and activities. So it may be something that I go to teach them, but I will have some sort of activity. And it may mean that a way that they can learn. It's not something we necessarily need to do in every class, but we need them to understand that we as teachers, we won't give up on them, and that no matter what they can do, and we get to see the change and really recognise it and say, hey, I noticed you at the beginning of the year, you were like this, but now I've noticed that you're like this. This is our job to change, to be able to see that and to encourage that positive growth mindset on what it is that they're actually doing. I have a stack, and when I say a stack of various games that I play with different young people, again, whether it may in any way, shape or form, where I actually get them and I use those games or at that particular activity to be able to then put a point across. So the other thing is really important is understanding the social and emotional needs of your students. So one of the things that we do need to get is that in a classroom, there is so much more going on than what it is that the teacher knows about. So there will be issues amongst friends, students that have their own anxiety, students that can't make friends, students that when they split up into groups, they get an anxiety. They don't want to go into this group. They want to go into that group. And this can actually be something that will very much impact the students and how they are going within the classroom. So you may actually not know that there are a whole lot of behind the scenes things going on. Students may be arguing, students may not be happy, fighting with other students. So there's a whole range of things that actually you need to be aware of, that when you're managing that classroom, you may not be privy to all of those things, but understand that there is definitely things going on in that classroom that you are not aware of, and able to see what goes on. And even with what's going on in online behaviour as far as online bullying and the things that may actually do that. So it's really for us to be able to also know that we are investigating in the behind the scenes relationships of different people. One of the, I think that this for me is really, really important is actually when we as teachers and do something, we are constantly encourage our students to apologise to each other when one's done this or that, because we just constantly deal with emotional issues. But it also means that you as a teacher, we're letting your students know, I'm sorry I was late because you might say, oh, I don't accept lateness, but there may be something that you do. I'm sorry I'm late because of this. I'm sorry I didn't actually take that into account when I was talking about that. So how can we actually say that the teachers are learning from this experience? Then you'll find that those students are more likely to feel safer than to admit when they're wrong. And we all need to understand we're all human beings. We won't always do things perfectly. And you can actually, and it's really important for all of us to understand, to get the resilience to be able to understand that we can actually say, I'm sorry. So, and then we can actually take our students aside to discuss how things could have been handled better by both teacher and student. So things can go on, and then it might not be always about you actually working out how it is that you know this. It might actually be a way where you're saying, I've never come across an issue like that, even in my experiences. So I'm learning as much as you can with these situations. So how can we make sure this actually works together for us on how we handle it? One of the things is that we need to do as teachers is we need to be prepared. This means we need to be prepared for different learning styles for different students. So if we think back of what we were talking about in the beach, how can I have something to go to visual? How can I have something to go to audio? How can I have something tactile that a student can actually touch? How is it that I can have something where I go into a story to reiterate the things that we're doing? So making sure that we're kind of like on all of those levels of what that can do. So we need to make sure that when we're setting a high standard for students, because we expect it and we feel like we understand that when we're setting them at a standard, we know that they'll be able to achieve and we want them to achieve. And making sure that we constantly give positive, frequent feedback to students. Oh, that was great. Again, it goes back to what I was talking about before. We want those teachers to like us. So if I'm getting a little, oh, that was really great, you did really well, then those teachers will, that student will actually try harder in that sense as well, because it makes them feel good. Making sure that there's a lot that students have a space where they know that there's ways to make fun and laughter. Make it that you can actually manage your classroom, that you are having fun. Bring in a sense of fun with you. That might actually just be in the way that you greet them, in your smile. Have a bit of a joke, have a bit of a laugh. And this is, again, what works with your personality and how you can actually do it. But by all means, it's really about saying I have an open door policy and I'm completely approachable in my sense. I guess that knowing how to help when you're able to pull back. So often we want to make sure that our students become independent students. So then we are actually able to give and teach them, and then go, hey, it's off for you to go off and do that by yourself. Help again, but you have to know that you can go away. And that's actually when we get to see the capacity and how far we can stretch them to be able to do that. And this does actually mean that we do need to be available to connect with our students before and after class, or via email and online, that they can do that. And I understand that creates much more work, but it means that they know that they can actually connect with you. And I guess here, getting to know your students, the way that we do that is by noticing attention to detail, knowing how they work differently when it's just you versus how students work in a group, and actually knowing the group and getting to understand it and get to know them as individuals and get to know how they work in that group. It's almost like building a community where we start to care about each other. So really create that thing where, hey, it's about being accountable. So if I say I'm going to do that and it's for the good of the whole of the classroom, keep those people accountable. And it may be that you pull them aside and say, hey, you've done this. This is actually let that class down. Nobody wants to disappoint anyone. And making sure, obviously, creating that space where there's respect, mutual respect, students feel safe. And we want to be able to have a collaborative learning space where you get to hear from me as a teacher. I get to hear from that one student, but I also get to hear from those group of students and what it is that they learn together and how can we all mix in with all of those things. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Please feel free, actually. That's my my email, my WhatsApp, and you can actually find me on just at Sacha Kaluri on all social media platforms. So please feel free to connect with me and ask me any questions. I'm really happy to stay here and answer any questions. So is there any way that if there are any questions on a Facebook Live that I can actually connect with people or speak to them?